My wife stood in front of more than 300 executives, raised her champagne glass, smiled at the crowd, and said, "I'd like everyone to give my husband a round of applause, because after 15 years, he finally managed to get himself fired." The ballroom erupted with laughter. Some people laughed because they thought it was a joke. Others laughed because they believed every word. I looked around the room. Friends, coworkers, people I'd spent years helping build successful careers. Not one of them came to my defense. Then I looked at my wife. She was laughing too. Not the kind of laugh that hides pain. The kind that comes from finally humiliating someone you've been waiting to embarrass. I could have stood up. I could have told everyone the truth. I could have exposed every lie right there in front of the entire room. Instead, I picked up my glass, took one slow sip of water, and checked my watch. There was only 1 minute left. 1 minute until the doors behind that stage opened. 1 minute until the most powerful man in the company walked into that ballroom. And the people laughing at me would realize they had chosen the wrong man to mock. They thought they were watching the end of my career. They had no idea. They were about to witness the biggest mistake of my wife's life. The night everyone laughed. People say you never truly know the person you married until they have an audience. I learned that lesson on a Saturday night, standing in a ballroom filled with nearly 300 executives, investors, and co-workers I'd known for over 15 years. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Soft piano music drifted through the room. Champagne glasses clinked as people celebrated another record-breaking year for the company. From the outside, it looked like a perfect evening. Inside, my marriage was about to collapse in front of everyone. Emily spent almost 3 hours getting ready that afternoon. She wore the black evening gown I had bought her for our 15th wedding anniversary. I still remembered the smile on her face when I surprised her with it. Back then, she looked at me as if I were the luckiest man in the world. Now, she barely looked at me at all. The drive to the hotel was painfully quiet. She kept scrolling through her phone, smiling at messages from her friends. Not once did she ask how I was feeling. Not once did she reach for my hand. Halfway through the drive, she finally broke the silence. "I almost didn't come tonight." I kept my eyes on the road. "Then why did you?" She shrugged without looking up. "People would ask questions if we didn't show up." That answer hurt more than I expected. After 15 years together, attending an event with me had become nothing more than another obligation. When we arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel, photographers stood outside taking pictures of arriving executives. Valets opened our doors. Employees greeted us with polite smiles. To everyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple. Appearances can be incredibly convincing. Inside the ballroom, familiar faces greeted me warmly. "David. It's good to see you. How have you been?" I smiled, shook hands, and exchanged a few polite words. But something felt different. Some conversations ended the moment I walked away. Others stopped the second I walked over. People smiled, but their eyes carried questions. Rumors had already reached this room. Across the ballroom, Emily quickly found her group of friends. Within minutes, they were laughing over glasses of champagne. At first, I paid little attention. Then I noticed something. Every few seconds, Emily looked in my direction. She whispered something. The entire group laughed. I told myself I was imagining it. Until I walked close enough to hear. "There he is." She tilted her glass toward me. "My unemployed husband." The women around her burst into laughter. One of them asked, "So, what happens now?" Emily smiled before answering. "I honestly don't know. But I guess someone has to be the responsible one in this marriage." More laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not uncomfortable laughter. The kind of laughter that comes from believing someone else's humiliation is entertainment. She knew I could hear every word. She simply didn't care. For a moment, I considered walking away. Instead, I walked to the refreshment table, picked up a glass of sparkling water, and quietly stood by myself. Arguing would have changed nothing. The people who believed the rumors weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for a story. 20 minutes later, the lights inside the ballroom dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual Leadership and Excellence Gala. Applause filled the room. Awards were presented. Department heads gave speeches. People laughed. Music played. Everything unfolded exactly as planned. Until the host smiled and said, "If anyone would like to share a few words about perseverance, teamwork, or success, the microphone is open." Before anyone else could react, Emily stood up. She smoothed her dress, picked up her champagne glass, and confidently walked toward the stage. For one brief second, I hoped she was about to surprise me. Maybe she would thank me for supporting her through the years. Maybe she would remind everyone that difficult seasons don't define a person's worth. Maybe she still remembered the man she had once fallen in love with. I couldn't have been more wrong. She took the microphone, looked directly at me, and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think my husband deserves a round of applause." The audience politely began clapping. Emily waited until the room grew quiet again. Then she delivered the sentence that changed my life forever. After 15 years of chasing success, my husband finally managed to get himself fired. The ballroom exploded with laughter. Some people laughed because they thought it was a joke. Others laughed because they believed it was true. I looked around the room. Not one person stood up for me. Not one person asked if it was true. They had already made up their minds. Emily lifted her glass with a smile. "I'm just thankful one of us still has a future." This time, even a few people looked uncomfortable. She had gone too far. I could have defended myself. I could have exposed the truth. Instead, I calmly lifted my glass, took one slow sip of water, and checked the time on my watch. 7:29 p.m. 1 minute. Just one more minute. Everyone in that ballroom believed they were watching the end of my career. They had no idea. They were about to witness the beginning of something none of them saw coming. It didn't start this way. People love to judge a broken marriage by its ending. They see the final argument, the public humiliation, the divorce papers, and they assume that's where the story began. It isn't. A marriage doesn't collapse in one night. It falls apart quietly. One disappointment. One broken promise. One moment of disrespect at a time. 15 years earlier, Emily wasn't the woman who stood on that stage. And I wasn't the man silently standing in the back of the ballroom. We were just two college students trying to build a future together. I met Emily during our final year of college. She was confident, ambitious, and could make an entire room laugh without trying. I was quieter. The kind of man who preferred listening instead of talking. While other students spent weekends at parties, I worked evening shifts in a warehouse just to pay my tuition. Life wasn't glamorous. But every paycheck brought me one step closer to the future I wanted. Emily used to wait outside the warehouse when my shift ended. Sometimes we'd share a $5 pizza. Other nights we'd sit on the hood of my old pickup truck, talking about the lives we dreamed of building. "I don't care if we're rich," she once told me. "I just want us to be happy." I believed her. Every word. After graduation, we got married in a small church with fewer than 60 guests. No expensive decorations. No luxury honeymoon. Just two families. a handful of close friends, and 2 people convinced that love could solve anything. The first few years weren't easy. Our apartment was tiny. The heating barely worked during winter. When it rained, we placed bowls on the floor because the roof leaked. Looking back, those were some of the happiest days of my life. We laughed over instant noodles, celebrated every paid bill like it was a major victory, dreamed about the home we'd someday buy. When I received my first promotion, Emily hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "I've never doubted you." Those words stayed with me for years. They became the reason I accepted every overtime shift, every late-night project, every weekend meeting. I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing the future we'd promised each other. And little by little, that future became reality. Within 10 years, I had climbed from a junior analyst to one of the company's most trusted senior executives. Not because I was the loudest person in the room, but because people knew one thing about me. If I gave my word, I kept it. The promotions came. Then the bonuses. Then the beautiful house Emily had always dreamed about. When she wanted to leave her marketing job and start her own consulting business, I didn't hesitate. I invested my savings into her dream without asking for anything in return. Watching her succeed felt like watching us succeed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Until success slowly changed the rules of our marriage. It started with small comments. After every business dinner, Emily compared us to someone else. "Did you see their new Mercedes? Look at the vacation they just posted. Can you believe how big their house is?" At first, I laughed. There will always be someone with more. She didn't laugh back. "No, David. There doesn't have to be." That was the first time I realized we weren't chasing the same dream anymore. A few months later, we attended a charity gala hosted by one of my clients. Driving home, Emily stared out the window. Finally, she said, "You know why people respect men like Richard? Our CEO?" She nodded. "He walks into a room and everyone notices." I smiled. "He earned that respect." She looked at me. "So why doesn't anyone look at you like that?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't need attention." "You should." "Why?" "Because invisible people never become unforgettable." I laughed awkwardly, hoping she was joking. She wasn't. Over the following years, the comparisons became criticism. The criticism became disappointment. And the disappointment slowly turned into disrespect. At parties, she interrupted me before I finished speaking. She corrected things that didn't need correcting. Sometimes she'd introduce me by my job title before mentioning I was her husband. It was subtle. Small enough that most people never noticed. But I noticed. Every single time. Friends occasionally pulled me aside. "Is everything okay between you two?" I'd smile and say the same thing every time. "She's just stressed." The truth was, I was trying harder to protect my marriage than to understand what was happening to it. Then one evening, everything changed. I came home earlier than expected after a client canceled a meeting. Emily didn't know I was back. She was sitting on the back patio with her closest friend. The kitchen window was slightly open. I wasn't trying to listen. But then I heard my name. "So?" her friend asked. "Are you still happy with David?" There was a long silence. Then Emily laughed. Not the laugh I fell in love with. A colder one. "You know what my biggest mistake was?" "What?" "I married a man with potential. Instead of waiting for a man who already had power." My heart stopped. I stood completely still. Unable to move. Unable to breathe. Her friend looked surprised. "You don't mean that." Emily slowly sipped her coffee. I kept waiting for him to become extraordinary. She stared into the garden. I think this is all he'll ever be. Those words hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. Because she wasn't trying to hurt me. She believed I wasn't listening. That was her honest opinion. For the first time in 15 years. I realized something terrifying. The woman who once believed in me no longer respected the man I'd become. And when respect quietly disappears, love rarely survives for long. I wish I could tell you I confronted her that night. I didn't. I quietly walked back to my car, sat behind the steering wheel, and stared through the windshield for nearly an hour. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because deep down, I already knew she meant every single word. I just wasn't ready to admit what our marriage had become. I had no idea that only a few weeks later, a confidential meeting inside my office would change my career forever. And unknowingly set the stage for the night Emily would regret for the rest of her life. The secret that changed everything. The following Monday began like every other Monday. The parking garage was full before sunrise. Employees rushed through the lobby carrying coffee cups and laptops. Elevators filled with people discussing deadlines, sales numbers, and weekend plans. To everyone else, it was just another workday. To me, it was the beginning of something that would change my life forever. At exactly 8:47 that morning, a new email appeared on my screen. Subject: Executive Board Meeting, Confidential. Attendance required. Boardroom 42. 10 a.m. No agenda. No explanation. Just one word that immediately caught my attention. Confidential. In 15 years with the company, I'd attended hundreds of executive meetings. But confidential meetings involving only the board, those were different. They usually meant one thing. Something major was about to happen. At 10 o'clock sharp, I walked into boardroom 42. The room felt unusually quiet. Around the long oak table sat only 7 people. The chairman, the CEO, the chief financial officer, the head of legal, and 3 members of the board. No assistants. No department heads. No observers. The chairman looked up as I entered. "Good morning, David." "Morning." He pointed toward the empty chair beside him. "Please, have a seat." The moment I sat down, the head of legal slid a folder across the table. The cover carried a single red stamp. Strictly confidential. The chairman folded his hands. "What we're about to discuss cannot leave this room. Not with coworkers. Not with friends. And not even with your family." The seriousness in his voice erased every question I had. I simply nodded. "I understand." The legal director placed a non-disclosure agreement in front of me. I signed it. Only then did the chairman continue. "Our current CEO has decided to retire." The announcement surprised everyone, including me. No rumors. No warning. Nothing. The CEO smiled calmly. "After 32 years. I think it's time." Silence filled the room. Then the chairman looked directly at me. "The board has already selected the next CEO." I nodded. "Congratulations to whoever it is." A few people smiled. Then the chairman said something I never expected. "Before the transition becomes public, we need one person to quietly oversee the entire process." He paused. "We chose you." For a second, I honestly thought he meant someone else. "Me?" "You." "Why?" The chairman smiled. "Because you've spent 15 years solving problems instead of creating them. You've earned trust. And trust is more valuable than talent." Another board member leaned forward. "This transition will involve every major department. finance, operations, legal, human resources. The incoming CEO wants one person coordinating everything. And he specifically requested you. Those last words caught my attention. He requested me? The chairman nodded. He has followed your work for years. I had never met the man. At least, that's what I believed. The next 2 hours disappeared in a blur. Documents, timelines, meetings, security protocols. Every major decision would pass through me before the new CEO officially took office. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't public recognition. No one would applaud me. In fact, most employees would never know I had been involved at all. Before the meeting ended, the outgoing CEO stopped me near the door. David. Yes? He smiled. Leadership isn't about standing in front of people. It's about making sure everyone else succeeds. Then he shook my hand. The board made the right choice. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely appreciated. Unfortunately, that feeling lasted less than 24 hours. Because while I was helping prepare the company's future, rumors began spreading through every floor of the building. Entire departments whispered about restructuring. Managers held unexpected meetings behind closed doors. Employees quietly updated their resumes. Nobody knew what was happening. And when people don't know the truth, they create one. By Wednesday afternoon, my calendar was overflowing. Private meetings, weekend strategy sessions, late-night conference calls. I barely had time to eat lunch. That's when my phone rang. Emily. I answered immediately. Hey. She didn't waste a second. Is something happening at your company? I looked around the hallway before replying. There are some internal changes. What kind of changes? I can't really discuss them. A long silence followed. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. Are you okay? I smiled to myself. I'm fine. Then why do you sound like someone carrying the weight of the world? Because I was. I wanted to tell her everything. That my career wasn't falling apart. That the board trusted me with the biggest project of my professional life. That everything we had worked toward was finally paying off. But I couldn't. I'm just busy. She sighed. You've been saying that a lot lately. I'm sorry. Another silence. Then she quietly asked. You're not hiding something from me, are you? The question hit harder than she realized. Because the answer was yes. For the first time in our marriage, I was. Not because I wanted to. Because I had promised I would. I'll explain when I can. She didn't sound convinced. I hope that's soon. The call ended. I stared at my phone for several seconds. I had always believed protecting my work would also protect my family. I was wrong. Because while I was keeping one secret, someone else was writing a completely different story. A story where David wasn't preparing the company's biggest transition. He was quietly losing everything. And before long, that lie would spread far beyond the office. Until even my own wife believed it. The rumor that destroyed my marriage. Rumors don't need proof. They only need people willing to repeat them. Within days, the entire company was talking about the restructuring. Every coffee station became a meeting place. Every elevator ride ended with whispered conversations. Nobody knew who would stay. And nobody knew who would leave. Fear spread faster than facts. I ignored it. There was too much work to do. Every day brought another confidential meeting. Another strategy session. Another late night. The transition had entered its most critical phase, and every mistake could cost the company millions. While everyone else guessed, I already knew what was coming. I just couldn't say a word. Then one Thursday morning, the official restructuring announcement was released. Employees across the company received the same email at exactly 9 o'clock. Departments would merge. Several executive positions would disappear. Reporting structures would change. Within minutes, panic swept through the building. Some employees started clearing their desks before anyone had spoken to them. Others called recruiters. A few simply sat in silence, staring at their computer screens. I spent almost the entire morning inside another closed-door meeting. When I finally walked out, my phone was vibrating nonstop. 21 missed calls. Most were from Emily. The rest were from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. I called Emily immediately. She answered before the first ring finished. So. Her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. I guess it's true. What is? You lost your job. I closed my eyes. Emily. Please don't lie to me. I'm not lying. Then explain it. I can't. She let out a bitter laugh. Of course you can't. Everything is always confidential. I leaned against the hallway wall. You know I can't discuss company matters. Company matters? She almost shouted. David, everyone already knows. Those words stopped me. What do you mean, everyone? My parents know. My brother knows. My friends know. Melissa called me this morning. She said your position was eliminated. I frowned. Melissa doesn't know anything. Then why are people saying it? Because rumors are easier to believe than silence. I wanted to say it. Instead, I remained quiet. Emily mistook my silence for guilt. I defended you at first. I told everyone there had to be another explanation. But you kept hiding things from me. So what else was I supposed to think? Every word felt heavier than the last. Not because she was angry. Because she no longer trusted me. I'm sorry. It was the only answer I could give. She laughed softly. You know what hurts the most? What? I don't even know if I believe you anymore. The call ended. I stared at the black screen of my phone. In 15 years, we had survived financial struggles, family problems, health scares, career setbacks. But somehow, silence had become the one thing our marriage couldn't survive. That evening, I drove home expecting another argument. Instead, Emily was sitting in the living room surrounded by shopping bags, designer shoes, luxury handbags, new jewelry. She looked happier than she had in weeks. You've been shopping? She looked up casually. I needed to clear my mind. I nodded. I understand. No. She replied. I don't think you do. There was something different about her. Not sadness. Not fear. Almost relief. She walked into the kitchen. I'd been thinking. I followed her. About what? Our future. Those two words instantly made my chest tighten. She folded her arms. We need to start being realistic. I am being realistic. No, David. You're pretending everything is normal. She looked directly into my eyes. What happens if you can't find another executive job? I'll figure it out. You don't know that. I've solved bigger problems. This isn't just about you anymore. I stayed silent. Then she said something I never imagined hearing from the woman I loved. I can't spend the rest of my life worrying about whether you'll recover. For a moment, I forgot how to speak. Not because I was angry. Because I couldn't believe she had measured 15 years of marriage against one rumor. Before I could answer, The doorbell rang. Emily opened the door. Her parents walked inside. I hadn't invited them. She had. Dinner felt less like a family visit and more like an intervention. After a few minutes of small talk, her mother finally asked, "So, have you started looking for work?" Emily answered before I could. "We're discussing his options." His options. As if I wasn't sitting at the same table. Her father gave me an awkward smile. "You're experienced. I'm sure someone will hire you." Someone. After spending years leading billion-dollar projects, I'd already been reduced to "someone will hire you." No one asked what had actually happened. No one questioned the rumor. They simply accepted it as truth. Emily reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "I'll take care of everything." Everyone smiled. Except me. Because in that moment, I realized she no longer saw me as her partner. She saw me as her responsibility. After her parents left, the house became painfully quiet. Emily stood near the stairs. "You could have defended yourself tonight." "I wanted to." "Then why didn't you?" I looked at her for several seconds before answering. "Because the truth doesn't belong to me." She slowly shook her head. "Then don't expect anyone else to believe it." She walked upstairs without another word. I remained alone in the kitchen. The lights were off. The house was silent. For the first time in 15 years. I wasn't wondering whether my marriage could be saved. I was wondering whether the woman I loved had already given up. A few days later, an elegant black envelope arrived in our mailbox. It was an invitation to the company's annual leadership gala. Emily smiled the moment she saw it. She thought it would be another glamorous evening. Neither of us realized it would become the night that changed both our lives forever. The invitation. Some invitations celebrate success. Others quietly expose the truth. 3 days after Emily's parents came over for dinner, a thick black envelope arrived in our mailbox. The company logo was embossed in gold across the front. Emily picked it up before I could. The gala invitations. For the first time in weeks. She looked genuinely excited. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out 2 elegant invitation cards. Annual Leadership and Excellence Gala. The Grand Meridian Hotel. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Black tie required. She smiled as if nothing had happened between us. "This is perfect." Her fingers were already moving across her phone. "I need to tell Melissa. I bet everyone's going." I quietly looked at my own invitation. The moment I saw the date, my heart skipped a beat. Saturday. The same night. The board's final leadership transition would also take place. Everything suddenly made sense. Weeks of secret meetings. Late-night conference calls. Security rehearsals. It had all been leading to one evening. This wasn't just another corporate gala. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the company. Emily looked at me. "You're coming, right?" I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to stay home. The rumors had spread too far. According to almost everyone attending that gala, I was already unemployed. Walking into a ballroom filled with people who believed my career was over wasn't exactly appealing. Emily noticed my hesitation. "Please don't embarrass me." I looked at her. "Embarrass you? If you don't come, everyone will start asking questions." I almost laughed. They were already asking questions. "I'll be there." She smiled with relief. "Good." Then she walked upstairs. Not because she wanted me beside her, but because she wanted the appearance of a perfect marriage. That realization hurt more than I expected. The following morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building felt unusually quiet. Most employees were busy preparing presentations, awards, and speeches for the gala. Meanwhile, I was heading toward another confidential meeting. The outgoing CEO was waiting inside his office. He stood near the window overlooking the city. Without turning around, he asked, "How are you holding up?" I smiled faintly. "I've had easier weeks." He nodded. "I imagine you have." After a long silence, he finally turned toward me. "Your wife is attending the gala?" "Yes." He studied my face for a moment. "Then Saturday may be harder than you expect." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he opened his desk drawer and handed me a small navy blue envelope. Inside was a seating card. It simply read, "Reserved. No table number." No explanation. I looked up. "I think you gave me the wrong card." He smiled. "No. It's exactly where you're supposed to be." "But I don't understand." "You will." Before I could ask another question, his assistant knocked on the door. "The board is waiting." He smiled one last time. "I'll see you Saturday." As I walked out, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone around me knew something I didn't. That evening, Emily transformed our bedroom into a fashion showroom. Designer dresses covered the bed. Shoes were lined up across the floor. Jewelry boxes sat open on the dresser. She held up one dress after another. "What do you think?" I looked up from my book. "The blue one." She smiled. "Really? It looks elegant." For just a second, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. Then her phone buzzed. She immediately picked it up. A message from Melissa. Emily laughed. "What is it?" She hesitated before reading it aloud. "I can't believe they're still inviting David after everything. The two of them apparently found that funny." Emily laughed again. Then she noticed I wasn't smiling. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh." She paused. "But you have to admit, it is a little awkward." Awkward. That single word echoed in my mind long after she fell asleep. Not because strangers believed the rumors. Because my own wife had become one of the people repeating them. Friday afternoon. One day before the gala. My phone rang. The caller ID displayed only one word. Chairman. I answered immediately. "Good afternoon, David." His voice sounded calm. "Everything is ready." "I'm glad to hear it. There is one small update." I stopped walking. "What kind of update?" "The incoming CEO has personally requested a change to tomorrow night's program." "What kind of change?" A soft chuckle came through the phone. "I'm afraid he insisted on keeping it a surprise. I've learned not to question him." I smiled. "I suppose I'll find out tomorrow." "You will." He paused. "And David?" "Yes?" "No matter what happens tomorrow night, trust the process." The call ended. I stood silently in the empty hallway. For weeks, my entire life had been built on trust. Trusting the board. Trusting the company. Trusting that the truth would eventually speak louder than rumors. What I didn't know was that someone else had been preparing for Saturday too. Emily. Every evening, after I fell asleep, she stood in front of our bedroom mirror, holding a champagne glass in one hand, and quietly practicing a speech. A speech she believed would make the entire ballroom laugh. She had no idea. Those same words were about to change her life forever. The toast. Some people rehearse speeches to inspire others. Emily rehearsed hers to embarrass me. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows. To anyone else, it looked like the beginning of a beautiful day. To me, It felt like the calm before a storm. I woke before sunrise. Sleep had abandoned me hours earlier. Standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, I watched the city slowly come to life. In less than 12 hours. The biggest secret of my professional life would finally become public. I just didn't know what it would cost me personally. A few minutes later, Emily walked downstairs. She looked happier than she had in months. Silk robe. Fresh coffee. A smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "You've been awake for a while," she asked. I couldn't sleep. She poured herself a cup of coffee. "I don't blame you." There was sympathy in her voice. But not the kind a wife offers her husband. It sounded more like pity. She looked at me for a moment before speaking again. "You know, tonight might actually help you." "How?" She shrugged. "People will get a chance to say goodbye." I looked at her quietly. She genuinely believed my career had ended. For the first time, I realized she wasn't pretending anymore. She had accepted the rumor as fact. The afternoon passed in silence. Emily left for her hair appointment. Then makeup. Then nails. Every hour she seemed more excited. Meanwhile, I drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel for one final meeting with the board. Unlike the glamorous ballroom upstairs, this meeting took place in a private conference room hidden behind the main stage. The chairman greeted me warmly. "Everything is ready." The outgoing CEO smiled. "One more meeting. Then history." A few seconds later, the conference room door opened. Every conversation stopped. A man in a perfectly tailored navy suit walked inside. Confident. Calm. Commanding. He greeted everyone with a handshake. When he reached me, he smiled. "Good afternoon, David." "Good afternoon. It's good to finally do this." "It is." During the next hour, we reviewed the final schedule. Arrival times. Security. The announcement. Everything had been planned down to the minute. As the meeting ended, the incoming CEO stopped me near the door. "David." "Yes?" He looked directly into my eyes. "Tonight. No matter what happens. Don't interrupt." I frowned. What if someone says something that isn't true? They will. What if they insult me? They probably will. I remained silent. He smiled. "Let them finish. The truth is always stronger when it doesn't have to defend itself." Those words stayed with me all afternoon. By 6:30 that evening, Emily and I were driving toward the hotel. The silence between us felt familiar now. She kept looking at something on her phone. Every few minutes. She smiled. "What are you reading?" She quickly locked the screen. "Nothing." It didn't look like nothing. She laughed. "I'm just practicing." "Practicing what?" "My speech." I glanced at her. "Speech?" "The host emailed everyone earlier this week. He asked if anyone wanted to make a short toast." "You volunteered?" She smiled proudly. "I thought it would be fun." Something about her expression unsettled me. Not because she wanted to speak. Because she looked excited. Almost too excited. The Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with activity. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers captured arriving executives. Flashes reflected across polished marble floors. As we stepped inside, people immediately began greeting Emily. She smiled. Laughed. Accepted compliments on her dress. I noticed something else. Conversation stopped whenever I approached. Some people smiled awkwardly. Others looked away. The rumors had arrived long before we did. Emily leaned toward one of her friends. They whispered. Both of them glanced at me. Then they laughed. I pretended not to notice. Across the ballroom, the chairman caught my eye. Without saying a word, he checked his watch, then gave me the smallest nod. I looked down at mine. 7:22 p.m. 8 minutes. Just 8 more minutes. Somewhere behind those ballroom doors, the final pieces were already moving into place. Emily had no idea. The guests had no idea. And the people quietly whispering about my failed career had no idea they were about to witness something none of them would ever forget. The lights slowly dimmed. Music faded. The master of ceremonies walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another annual Leadership and Excellence Gala. Applause filled the ballroom. Awards were presented. Department heads delivered brief speeches. Employees celebrated another successful year. Everything unfolded exactly as planned. Then the host smiled. Before tonight's special announcement, we'd like to invite anyone who wishes to share a few words about perseverance, teamwork, or success. A few people politely declined. One manager thanked his department. Another congratulated his staff. Then, before anyone else could move, Emily stood. She picked up her champagne glass, straightened her dress, and confidently walked toward the stage. As she reached the microphone, she looked directly at me and smiled. Not the smile of a loving wife. The smile of someone who believed she already owned the room. I slowly placed my glass on the nearest table. Across the ballroom, the chairman stopped talking. The outgoing CEO folded his hands. Several board members exchanged silent glances. None of them knew what Emily was about to say. Neither did I. The ballroom became completely silent. Emily adjusted the microphone, took a slow breath, and began to speak. The next 60 seconds would change every life in that room. No audience. Just a tired woman carrying a small photo album against her chest. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. She slowly opened the album. Our wedding. Our first apartment. Our honeymoon. The day we bought our first house. Pictures of two people who genuinely believed they would grow old together. Tears rolled down her face. "I miss us." I looked at the photographs for a long moment. "So do I." Hope appeared in her eyes. She reached across the table. "I know I don't deserve another chance. But if there's even the smallest possibility, I'll spend the rest of my life earning your trust back." I remained silent. Months earlier, I would have said yes without hesitation. Because I loved her. But love without respect eventually becomes loneliness. I gently closed the photo album. "Emily, I forgave you the night of the gala." She looked up hopefully. Then I quietly continued. "But forgiveness and rebuilding a marriage are two different things." Her smile disappeared. "You don't love me anymore?" I took a slow breath. "I'll probably always care about the woman I married. But the woman who stood on that stage, she wasn't the woman I married." Silence filled the room. Finally, I asked the one question neither of us could escape. If the CEO had never walked into that ballroom, if everyone had continued believing I was unemployed, would you still be sitting here asking for another chance? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because we both knew the answer. She lowered her head. "I'm so sorry." "I know." She stood, picked up the photo album, and quietly walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. "I really did love you." I smiled sadly. "I believe you. But somewhere along the way, You started loving success more than the man standing beside you. She nodded once. Then closed the door behind her. That was the last time I ever saw my wife. A year later. Life looked very different. The company had completed its most successful year in history. The new CEO often joked that I should finally accept a public executive position. Every time, I politely declined. I had spent years learning something most people never do. Real leadership isn't about standing in front of the room. It's about making sure everyone else succeeds. One afternoon, while leaving the office, a young employee hurried after me. "Sir." I turned around. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is it true that you stayed silent because you already knew everyone would discover the truth?" I smiled. "No." He looked confused. "No?" I stayed silent because I didn't need to win an argument. I only needed to protect my character. He stood quietly, thinking about those words. Then he smiled. "I hope I can become that kind of man someday." I shook his hand. You don't become that kind of man when life is easy. You become him when life gives you every reason to become bitter. And you choose dignity instead. He thanked me and walked away. As I stood alone in the parking lot, I looked up at the evening sky. For years, I thought success meant promotions, money, titles, respect. I was wrong. The greatest achievement of my life wasn't earning the trust of a board of directors. It wasn't being called sir by the new CEO. It wasn't proving hundreds of people wrong. It was discovering that my value had never depended on anyone else's opinion. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. Not even my wife. Because the strongest people don't spend their lives trying to prove others wrong. They simply keep living in a way that proves themselves right. If there's one lesson my story taught me, it's this. Never measure someone's worth by the rumors you hear. Measure it by how they treat people when no one is watching. Because titles can disappear. Money can disappear. Even the people you love can disappear. But character stays. And in the end, character is the only thing that earns a standing ovation long after the applause has faded. The best revenge isn't watching the people who hurt you suffer. It's becoming someone who no longer needs revenge at all. Thank you for listening to my story. And if it reminded you that integrity is worth more than reputation, then maybe everything that happened that night wasn't wasted after all.